Recently, Ben Shapiro and Sam Harris had a discussion. It was interesting, but for the most part uneventful. Sam Harris talked about how he doesn't believe in free will and talked a lot about morality. Ben Shapiro said, I don't understand how you can talk about morality and judgments of right and wrong if you don't believe in free will. Sam Harris said, well, I wrote a couple books. Ben said, well, I read them and I guess still didn't understand or whatever. But then during the questions from the audience segment, things got interesting.
Hi, I'm Joe Gananda. Thank you for coming. Ben and Sam, what came up for me when you were talking about truth and going back about it, and it seemed like Ben was saying that the Jewish truth is this foundational precept that we can then derive, like make other truth claims on. And so what I'm getting, the lack of what I'm getting from Sam is that the kind of great traditions, the religious traditions have these books that are incredible scaffolds for a moral framework, a cultural framework. And the missionaries to me is like the in situ evidence of that you could take people and give them this book and then just send them off and they could drop into random cultures and just re-architect whole cities. Los Angeles was missionary. So, that was thousands, if not hundreds of years ago. And we can point to those books, and even today, they're providing guidance for so many people. What is the modern equivalent of that? I mean, what is the great text that the atheist tradition would lie on, from which we can have a wellspring of moral construct? Like Jordan Peterson does an incredible job with his biblical series of taking the Bible and spinning off all of these understandable archetypical truths from which we can kind of derive ways to live. And I don't know what the Twitter, Instagram, Kim Kardashian, where are we getting that from in the contemporary culture?
Well, so the answer is the totality of human knowledge and human conversation that is useful at any moment. I'm not saying that you can't read the Bible. I mean, whatever you can find in the Bible that's useful and beautiful and true, well, I've got no argument against using it. It's just that there's so much in there that is patently insane and needlessly savage and absolutely divisive if you take it seriously. It's a horror show of certain sections of them. There are other sections that are beautiful, and so again, there's no, if you're going to say you read Ecclesiastes this morning and it just set the tone for your day, and you got no argument from me. But
if you're an alien race and you read the Bible, you could come away with a lot of great truths and understandings about
you would come
human
away
condition.
You would come away with almost no appreciation for how rich and beautiful the human experience is, even now, right?
Sure.
I mean, like there's not a single paragraph in the Bible that could not have been written by someone who lived 1,500 years ago,
but if someone said, "I have no moral foundation," point me to a book to get started at. What is?
I mean, this, as I've said, it's like you could wander blindfolded into a Barnes and Noble, if Barnes and Noble still exists, and find something better than many of the so-called moral books of the Bible. I mean, it's like Leviticus and Deuteronomy and Exodus.
The United States of America is a result of the Enlightenment, a philosophical movement where there is a whole lot of books, including The Republic, The Apology, so much wisdom from so much philosophers. As George Washington said, it was the result of many years of labor by philosophers, sages, and legislators. So there's a whole bunch of books outside of the Bible. And as Sam Harris said, when it comes to finding a book for moral guidance, as he puts it, go into a bookstore, put on a blindfold, have somebody spin you 3 times, and just go around and stumble into a book, and chances are it's going to provide you better moral guidance. Now, I do disagree with Sam Harris. You don't have to go to a bookstore. You don't have to leave your house. Just look around your computer right now. What have you got? All right, I got a box of Frango Mint chocolates. There are about 2 left. This provides better moral guidance than the Bible. I got a $5 gift card for Jimmy John's. This provides better moral guidance. I got a manual that came with my electric shaver. This provides better moral guidance. I got a box here of macaroni and cheese, includes instructions, nutrition, and why you should love Kraft macaroni and cheese. This provides better moral guidance. I've got a glass of water. This provides better moral guidance. You don't have to leave your house.
I mean, this is, you know, we can agree to disagree about this, but I mean, I think the precept that if your wife is found not to be a virgin on your wedding night, you should take her to her father's doorstep and stone her to death, right? That's just a bad idea. Right? We don't have to venerate that. We should be able to cut that out of the human conversation. And because we have this notion of revelation, we can't.
Yeah.
And this is much less of a problem with someone like Ben, obviously. It is an excruciating problem when you're talking about the Muslim world and what is being done with the Quran. And the Quran and the Hadith, taken together, is like the worst operating system that exists, right? And it's running on the brains of almost 2 billion people to one or another degree. And that is a civilizational challenge, and a veneration of this notion of revelation is what it's anchored to. Right, we have to get out of the revelation business and get into the conversation business.
But get out into another book. And I mean, like we need something else to
what makes you think we need a book? I mean, this isn't a book. This is just we're writing the book right
wait
now.
A second. I mean, it's not just a book, right? I mean, in Deuteronomy, we Jews are instructed to set upon people with stones who entice us to worship gods not known to our fathers. And
So that was Eric Weinstein, and listen to what he said. Instructions to kill people who introduce gods that were different than anything that your fathers knew. Well, what would Jesus have been? Think about it.
the code doesn't run, okay? So the problem is that there's like an epigenetics, in some sense, to these books. And it says this stuff is inoperable, and we have ways of
This is the part that I think that a simplistic understanding of how revelation interacts with human behavior is.
Wouldn't it be a better book if you could just take out that one passage?
Okay, it would be better.
So I think that you're so number one. The answer is that the Talmudic tradition largely does take out that passage. I mean, there's an entire long, thousands-year-long history.
But the fact that it was included in the first place, doesn't that suggest to you that this was kind of a merely human enterprise and not a matter of being the perfect word?
No, what it suggests to me. I mean, I'll give you the traditional religious answer, which I think actually holds some weight, which is that if you are going to convey any sort of written text or moral text to a people, the people who you're talking to have to have some understanding of what the hell you're talking about. If you use the word epigenetics in the year 1200 BC, it would be kind of difficult for folks to understand what the hell you're talking about.
So the reason why God instructs his people to kill people is because he couldn't use fancy words that they wouldn't be able to understand.
But it's also true to say that it was possible in 500
and all of the more,
BC.
Sorry, one more statement and then I'll let it go.
Yeah.
And that is that the moral system by which you suggest that portion of the Bible should be removed is built on the moral system of the Bible developed over 2,000 years. Your value for the value of women.
It's just not true.
It is true because the fact is that it doesn't exist in the vast majority of other cultures over the vast majority of human history.
No, but it does exist. And it existed in 500 BC. It was possible in 500 BC to enunciate a more ethical framework than that.
So Ben Shapiro is saying, hey, look at the progress we've made over the last 2,000 years, but the Bible doesn't progress. It's a static book. And he's basically arguing, well, this book gives you the knowledge of right and wrong to know stoning women to death is wrong, and it's also the same book that commands the stoning to death of women. Yeah, that makes sense.
That's why there was a development in the ethical framework.
Well, no, but I mean,
we have an oral law.
The Buddha didn't say stone her on her father's doorstep. Now, the Buddha was no great promulgator of women's rights, but he wasn't that bad. And
what I'm saying is that your definition of that bad comes from a tradition that has developed the idea that this is bad.
Well, okay, but so then
you live in a context.
Convict me of Buddhism, then. I mean, it's not.
But I don't believe that your values were really shaped by Buddhism. I think your values were pretty much shaped by a Judeo-Christian tradition in which you lived, and you used those values as a springboard.
That's simply untrue. But
where did you grow up?
Well, no. If you're talking about where I came to my most considered view of ethics, It's by having a much larger conversation with
I-
all of
That's
the
not what I'm
world
talking
literature.
about. That's
right?
not what I'm talking about. I'm not
Am I-
talking about your browsing in world literature.
No, but
I'm talking about the fundamental precepts that you took to be moral from the time you were a child, a rise in a Western civilization predicated on Judeo-Christian notions of good and bad.
You can say that, but again, we're back to bridge building.
Here, I don't think Sam Harris was prepared, which is unfortunate. He should have seen this coming. He should have known that Ben Shapiro was going to try to say that he grew up in this society that was based on Judeo-Christian values, which is a lie. Our morality does not come from the Bible. There's many sources that we get our morality from, and a lot of progress we've made has been extremely recent in human history. But Sam Harris, I think he lets him get away with it. He really doesn't respond, as you'll see in the ending segment of this video. I wish he was prepared. I wish he would have nailed them to the wall on this. Once again, we have many sources for our country. The First Amendment in the United States Constitution, the Bill of Rights, is complete opposite with the first commandment in the Bible. You shall have no God but the God of Abraham, versus you can pray to whatever you want and however you want. There's no mention of the Bible in the Constitution. The word creator and the Declaration of Independence, is which they so desperately hold on to. Oh yeah, this makes it a Christian nation. That word creator was written by somebody who said that the story of Jesus' virgin birth was a myth. That's how Thomas Jefferson felt. This is not a country that was built on the Bible. Once again, it was built on the Enlightenment. And unfortunately, I think Sam Harris, he heard him, but it probably just sounded so ridiculous that he didn't address it. And once again, I really wish he was prepared, and really wish he was prepared to nail him on that ridiculous comment, because he needs to stop saying it. It's not true. It's an absolute lie to say that our country and our society was built on the primitive Bible. I mean, to be honest, as a patriotic American, I find it insulting to talk about my country that way. The building of this country was founded on such a higher level than this primitive, ridiculous book.
The basic argument that we're having is that you think all history is contingent, and I don't think that all history is contingent. I think there's an element of necessity.
The problem with religion, for me, in many cases, is that and apologies to the people who are still standing there, but I think this is worth...
Sorry, it got fun.
It's that the better angels of our nature are often better than the doctrines that seem to inform so much of human morality. I mean, people don't come into this world eager to stone other people to death for thought crimes, or for working on the Sabbath, or for not having a hymen. You have to be taught to do these things. I'm not saying, we are apes, so we're not perfect.
In most cultures, people do come into the world eager to stone each other for a variety of reasons. I mean, the levels of violence in pre-modern society are incredibly high.
That's absolutely true. You don't need doctrines to be violent, but when you have doctrines that are clearly built on xenophobia and superstition and an attitude toward evidence that is unscientific, should just promulgate them generation after generation with no way of course correcting, because it is anathema to edit these traditions, and to have the best you can do is to sort of have some further argument which says we don't have to honor this all the time. That it just seems like it slows down the human progress.
I don't think it slows down. I think it roots it to the foundations. Meaning that there's a famous story in the Talmud where there's a rabbi who comes along to a Sanhedrin. It's a group of people who are about to rule on the law, and the rabbi says to them, "I have this doctrine, and I promise you it's right." And the people in the room say, "It's wrong. We don't believe you." And he says, "I'll prove to you that it's right." And he says, if it's right, then let the walls of the room collapse in, lean in, and the walls of the room lean in. And the people say, you know what, that's not in the Bible. Even if you get the walls of the room to lean in favor of your opinion, that doesn't mean that it's true, because we were given the ability to basically rule on the law. And then there's a voice from heaven, right? This is in Jewish text, right? There's a voice from heaven that comes down and says, that this rabbi is right. And the people say to God, right? They say to the voice of heaven, That's not the law that you gave us. You gave us the capacity to interpret. And later there's a prophet who they're speaking to, and the prophet basically says, God was happy when you did that, because the whole point of a revelation is that there's an interaction between God and man that is ongoing. Okay, and so to take the simplified version and then to pillory the simplified version, it exists in many cultures in the world. And I'm not going to pretend that it doesn't exist in fundamentalist Islamic countries, because clearly it does. But to lump all revealed religion into one category as though everyone who believes in revealed religion stopped the development of human morality at point one is just not accurate.
So what Ben Shapiro just said is morality progresses, which means it's progressed from the Bible, which means you can no longer trust the Bible, which means there's moral relativism, and it means, where's your objective morality from God then? Where's your objective morality from God when you just said that morality has progressed from what's in the Bible? So how are you determining what in the Bible is moral and what's not moral anymore, what we should follow, what we should no longer follow? I mean, your whole concept of objective morality just went out the window.
Look, there's an issue also that there's that which is fit, and there's that which is not fit. So if you like the Shaker religion, you like the furniture, you like the way that they have hymns, I think you're down to your last Shaker, or maybe they've completely died out because it wasn't a fit thing. They stopped taking recruits. So however beautiful it is, it self-terminates, and you have self-extinguishing things, right? If you have a tradition that is absolutely brutal, cruel, without grace, but is highly fit, it's winning in a different metric than the metric that Sam is talking about. And sometimes what happens is that you end up denaturing these things so that you get something that is beautiful and self-terminating. The other issue has to do with the fact that in all of these issues, the texts don't do anything. It's the machines interpret the texts. And even if you have a tradition like, this prohibition against innovation in Islam, bid'ah, where you're not allowed to innovate, because the text is its own instruction manual, and you're not allowed to put this extra structure like, binding repressor so that the code doesn't run around it, to use a genetic metaphor. You have a situation in which every religion has to continue to adapt. And so whether or not there's a prohibition against innovation, they're all innovating, and they're all trying to run some code more than others. Some gets promoted, some gets repressed. No matter what they tell you, you're allowed to do. And if it doesn't work out, the thing self-terminates. But when you're looking at something which is an absolutely enormous percentage of humanity, you have to ask yourself, are you upset with that thing because it violates grace, or because it violates fitness, because it violates truth? These are all different things. And I think that it's just important to recognize, if you go to Barnes & Noble and there are two separate books that tell you, one that you have to communicate with your partner in a relationship, and the other one that says relationships are not about communication, that's where everything goes wrong, you start to realize that there is this problem that we don't have a great atheist text that tells us what to do. If you want to go into a particular religion, you get this idea, like in Judaism, of Ehad, one single, unified voice. If that works for you, great. However, you can also shop around and deal with the dialectics and the contradictions. And so I think, in some sense, there's no way out. You got to struggle with it, and you have to think about it on a whole bunch of different levels.
Thank you.
So that was Eric Weinstein closing things out. Then it went to the next question. So as Eric said, look at that scenario. Say you have two books. One book says, do not stone women to death. Another book says, stone them to death if they don't prove their virginity on their wedding night. So which book do you choose? Well, what if through revelation, the book that says, that commands you to stone a woman to death, that's not just a man saying it. This is coming from the all-powerful creator of the universe. This is coming from God. So then what do? And the answer is you ignore it. So you just ignore all the horrible things in the Bible. I have no doubt that, not Sam Harris, but the other guy that I can't remember right now, Ben Shapiro. I have no doubt that Ben Shapiro is a good guy, nice guy. No doubt that he's a good father, a good husband. When you look at the Jewish people, when you look at how many Nobel Prize winners come from such a small population of the world, and yet have such a high percentage of Nobel Prize winners, including Nobel Prize winning in science, you see that they're able to be successful and be such a big part of human progress. And yet, like Ben Shapiro, kind of defend these ridiculous beliefs and actually say this nonsense. Yeah, our society was built on the Bible. So, it would be really nice if they could just stop with the facade, stop with the delusion, and just let go of that crutch. Just recognize it for what it is. You don't need it. You're actually not using it. You're saying that you are. You're saying that this is what you believe, but you pick and choose. You're really not living your life like you believe in this stuff. I remember the magician Penn Jillette talking about this. It's like, you don't act like you take this Bible literally, and I don't think that's what Ben Shapiro is saying, but the people who claim to take it literally. It's like, you can drive a car, you can leave the house and find your way back. You don't act like you're absolutely crazy. You don't act like you would stone somebody to death for working on the wrong day. But somehow they're very good at claiming and going to these services and doing the rituals and claiming allegiance and defending this book and promoting this book, even though obviously it really doesn't play any part of their lives. If it did, they would be in prison. But what can you do? Hope you enjoyed that segment. I'll provide a link for the entire back and forth. It was interesting, but like I said, what I shared I thought was the most interesting part. That's where things got a little contentious, and that's where you saw Sam Harris hit the Bible pretty good. This is Jim Wall. Thanks for watching. Until next time.
Cisco, do we have to leave all our good friends now? Only until next time, Pancho. Adios, amigos.